Chapter 14. A Man Who Was Ove and a Woman on a Train. She had a golden brooch pinned to her front, in which the sunlight reflected hypnotically through the train window. It was 6:30 in the morning. Ove had just clocked off his shift and was actually supposed to be taking the train home. But then he saw her on the platform with all her rich auburn hair and her blue eyes and all her effervescent laughter, and he got back on the train. Of course, he didn't quite know himself why he was doing it. He had never been spontaneous before in his life, but when he saw her, it was as if something malfunctioned. He convinced one of the conductors to lend him his spare pair of trousers and shirt, so he didn't have to look like a train cleaner, and then Ove went to sit by Sonia. It was the single best decision he would ever make. He didn't know what he was going to say, but he had hardly had time to sink into the seat before she turned to him cheerfully, smiled warmly, and said hello. And he found he was able to say hello back to her without any significant complications. And when she saw that he was looking at the pile of books she had in her lap, she tilted them slightly so he could read their titles. Ove only understood about half the words. "You like reading?" she asked him brightly. Ove shook his head with some insecurity, but it didn't seem to concern her very much. She just smiled, said that she loved books more than anything, and started telling him excitedly what which of the ones in her lap was about. And Ove realized that he wanted to hear her talking about the things she loved for the rest of his life. He had never heard anything quite as amazing as that voice. She talked as if she was continuously on the verge of breaking into giggles. And when she giggled, she sounded the way Ove imagined champagne bubbles would have sounded if they were capable of laughter. He didn't quite know what he should say to avoid seeming uneducated and stupid, but it proved to be less of a problem than he had thought. She liked talking, and Ove liked keeping quiet. Retrospectively, Ove assumed that was what people meant when they said that people were compatible. Many years later, she told him that she had found him quite puzzling when he came to sit with her in that compartment, abrupt and blunt in his whole being. But his shoulders were broad and his arms so muscular that they stretched the fabric of his shirt, and he had kind eyes. He listened when she talked, and she liked making him smile. Anyway, the journey to school was so boring that it was pleasant just to have some company. She was studying to be a teacher. Came on the train every day. After 10 or 20 kilometers, she changed to another train, then a bus. All in all, it was a 1.5 hour journey in the wrong direction for Ove. Only when they crossed the platform that first time, side by side, and stood by her bus stop, did she ask what he was doing there. And when Ove realized that he was only 5 or so kilometers from the military barracks where he would have been headed, not been for that problem with his heart, The words slipped out of him before he understood why. "I'm doing my military service over there," he said, waving vaguely. "So maybe we'll see each other on the train going back as well. I go home at 5. Ove couldn't think of anything to say. He knew, of course, that one does not go home from military installations at 5 o'clock, but she clearly did not. So he just shrugged. And then she got on her bus and was gone. Ove decided that this was undoubtedly very impractical in many ways, but there was not a lot to be done about it. So he turned round, found the signpost pointing out the way to the little center of the tiny student town where he now found himself, at least a 2-hour journey from his home. And then he started walking. After 45 minutes, he asked his way to the only tailor in the area, and after eventually finding it, ponderously stepped inside to ask whether it would be possible to have a shirt ironed and a pair of trousers pressed, and if so, how long it would take. 10 minutes if you wait, came his answer. Then I'll be back at 4, said Ove and left. He wandered back down to the train station and lay down on a bench in a waiting hall. At 3:15, he went all the way back to the tailor's, had his shirt and trousers pressed, while he sat waiting in his underwear in the step toilet, then walked back to the station and took the train back with her for an hour and a half back to her station, and then traveled for another half hour to his own station. He repeated the whole thing the day after, and the day after that. On the following day, the man from the cash desk at the train station intervened and made it clear to Ove that he couldn't sleep here like some loafer. Surely he could understand that. Ove saw the point he was making, but explained that there was a woman at stake here. When he heard this, the man from the ticket desk gave him a little nod, and from then on let him sleep in the left luggage room. Even men at train station ticket desks have been in love. Ove did the same thing every day for 3 months. In the end, she grew tired of his never inviting her out for dinner, so she invited herself instead. "I'll be waiting here tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock. I want you to be wearing a suit, and I'd like you to invite me out for dinner," she said succinctly as she stepped off the train on Friday evening. And so it was.